Hello and welcome to the first episode of Why Geopolitics Matter, now in its podcast version. And today with you, it's me, Laura.
Hi, it's Meredith.
And it's me, Antoine.
I am very excited about this one. It's the podcast edition, but don't forget that you also have the website to go to, whygeopoliticsmatter.com. Make sure to check that out. Now, for today, we have 3 topics that are going to be very interesting. And we're going to start with you, Antoine. You're going to talk to us about the Munich Security Council. So can you give us a sense of what it is for those who are not necessarily in the international relations area? And what are your takeaways?
Yes. So very quickly, it's a summit about security. According to its name, it's very, very obvious. This time it was kind of complicated. It came as an element that is often mentioned is that it came as a wrecking ball to frame the international world order. So basically, a world order that is completely restricting around difficult and more imperialist visions of the world. Of course, we can cite the Russian imperialism in Ukraine, but we can also cite the American one with the visions over Greenland and bigger security for the US. Or as well, we can cite China with, of course, Taiwan. But there's some elements from region to region came as the main topics. First of all, the US. The US mentioned again their how could I say that, their attachment to Europe and to a certain vision of Europe. At the same time, still trying to minimize the impact the mentions of Greenland made at the beginning of the year. You have also Europe, who started to realize that more autonomy and more security for itself was a good thing. So, of course, there we have basically 2 visions of Europe that are at stake. You have, I would say, more French one with more autonomy from the EU, and you have also a German one. It's a bit more specific, but we'll talk about that probably later. And finally, we also have China, who came in and reframed a bit its position with Europe, stating specifically that it wasn't in a conflict with Europe. So once again, the world order is quite complicated, especially at the beginning of 2026. So I think this conference was needed for the EU, and probably good as well for the US and China to reframe a bit their position in the statements made at the beginning of the year that were kind of complicated.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to the topic of the US, because I think that was one of the biggest, let's say, points that people were expecting. What was going to be the narrative this year, right? Compared to last year, compared to what J.D. Vance said, which was, in the words of Alistair, he said it was a bucket of vomit all over Europe's values. And I feel like this time with Marco Rubio, he was way more diplomatic. So that I think that it gives hope to European leaders in terms of that previous perception that friendship or cooperation was pending by a thread. And I think that he helped reframing that in a very diplomatic, in a very polite way. Even if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, at the end of his discourse, of Marco Rubio's discourse, people stood up to clap at him. Which, according to some commentaries, that showed that Europe was still hoping for the US to come back together with Europe, and that that Europe had learned nothing from all of the experience or all the events that we've been having lately. That we're still, like, let's say, attached to that. Well, we love some family metaphors lately, right? With the US saying that it's like the father trying to discipline the children. And some others say that the relationship is more of husband and wife, and like theirs was a divorce. So with Marco Rubio's speech, that relationship got together, like, yeah, there was a made up, let's say. But I think Europe is quite aware of the situation, that like Europe knows that they cannot depend on the US, even if Marco Rubio says pretty things and talks about the Rolling Stones and how meaningful European history is. I think that they know that they need to not rely on the US, right?
That's probably the biggest point for Europe.
Mm.
But I'm probably as well a bit biased there because I'm very much Europeanist.
Mm.
The problem is that, yeah, as you said, Rubio wrapped very good phrases to be a bit more diplomatic. At the same time, I think that vision of at least of Trump's administration's politics on the world is and will remain America first. So what the European leaders would need or should understand about that is that I think it's like resumed in a very simple phrase that states don't have friends, they only have partners. And that's something that Europe, I think, forgot a bit with its partnership and relationship with the US. And I believe that so far the beginning of 2026 was relatively good for European leaders just to realize that they have to do their own stuff. So they have to build more serious security frame
Mm-hmm.
just for example, just for themselves. So more autonomy, more security, and also less dependence on the American industry as well.
Yeah, and I think Europe is on its way already, increasing the defense spending, and most recently deciding that they're going to support more European telecommunications and platforms to, yeah, not depend on US technology, or especially AI as well, which we're very reliant on.
I would like to go back to Marco Rubio's speech.
Yeah.
There were some of the things in there that really stood out to me that were very nationalist and imperialist language that kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable coming from the United States. Basically, he said, if we have to do it alone, we will, and we are going to take on the task of restoration. It was very like, America is going to steamroll over Europe and get their agenda done, which is something that like Europe should be really looking out for. They should be, they have been alarmed by the U.S. actions that have been having in the last 2 months. It's been a lot. So it is important to understand that the Europeans should be alarmed at what the US is doing. And when they say, if we have to do it alone, we will, people should be nervous about that. And it kind of feels a little bit of like an abusive relationship where the US can just steamroll and do whatever they want and expect the Europeans to just say, oh, thank you so much for your help. And it's just to take that action to just kind of roll over is something that the Europeans shouldn't be doing anymore. They are starting to build up their defense systems. They are starting to work on their digital sovereignty. Like things like that are so important to make sure that the U.S. is in check and prove that they're an actual partner and not just an abuse victim. So just some of the things he said did stand out to me and were really uncomfortable. And based on the administration that's in the U.S. now, it's so volatile. You have to be very careful, and you do have to walk the line because there is no predictability to this administration.
Adding to that, something that stood out because of its absence was the fact that Marco Rubio never really mentioned the Ukraine-Russian war in his speech, and he was actually supposed to going to be at a meeting about the war, but he decided to skip it. Who knows the reasons, maybe willingly or not, something came out. But the fact was that he was not there. Nonetheless, he met later on the sidelines of the conference Volodymyr Zelensky, and they took a picture together. So, yeah, very diplomatic as well. Nonetheless, still, the situation is the same. There's no mention of support for Ukraine. There's no real clarity there. How do you guys take it?
To jump in, I think that pretty much what the US have in mind is that they are starting to act at least more and more that Ukraine is not their problem, it's a European problem. And they start facing the hard reality that China is becoming more and more powerful as well. I think it's just shifting from like shifting from Europe to the Pacific, and I believe that still Volodymyr Zelensky mentioned in his speech the fact that Europe was not at the desk of the discussions of peace, which is a very important thing as well. Is that the US don't care about Ukraine, but still have these peace talks going, and without Europe, which is a bit alarming for European leaders as well.
So now shifting the focus a little bit from the US to more on the European level and regarding the reaction of European countries and leaders to the Ukraine and Russian war, do you think we came to consensus on being on the same side, or what is your sense of it, Antoine, regarding this topic at the Munich conference?
I would say it's also very complicated between the countries within Europe as well. And it also very much depends on who's ruling which country. So far, European leaders have been quite cooperative on the Ukraine issue and on the war, and it has been very helpful to reinforce the cooperation within the European Union. But at the same time, you see very much populist leaders. There was Babiš in Czech Republic who got elected very recently, and who basically stopped the sending of ammunition to Ukraine, but at the same time agreed to frame it. It's very complicated. So he doesn't want to pay for it, but he accepts to ship and to deliver the ammunitions. So there's still, I think, in the heads of most European leaders, this will and feeling of a need to help Ukraine. But it will very much depend on future elections in Europe. And so far, it's been mostly cooperation and greater cooperation since the war.
Great. Right.
There is going to be quite a change coming up too. Well, not a change if it actually goes through, but in Hungary, with Viktor Orban being such a proponent against helping Ukraine and trying to get access to gas and pipelines and whatnot. So with the upcoming elections in Hungary, that's going to be an interesting dynamic for Babiš and other local countries that in Slovakia who have been following what he has been saying about the Ukrainian war. So there is going to be some, if there are going to be changes depending on how the election outcome is, but that is starting to ramp up right now, and currying favor with the United States is going to be really important for Orban since he's basically a very good friend of Trump's. So it is, so that dynamic could change if the elections go a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I would like to turn to the second topic of our podcast for today, which is the African Union Summit. This is the 39th edition of the African Union Summit that took place during mainly the 14th and 15th of February. There were other more informal sessions before the 14th, but mainly the big discussions happened on the 14th and the 15th. And this is very, I would say, not on the spotlight because of the Munich Security Council, which happened around the same time. And there were some very interesting conversations happening, which is a shame that did not make the headlines, let's say, of the main media. So this conference took place in Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. And interestingly enough, it's the third largest diplomatic capital in the world after Washington and Geneva. So how cool is that? They have the UN headquarters in there. Sorry, the UN Economic Commission for Africa is there. Then also the headquarters of the African Union and about 150 embassies. So it's worth to travel to Ethiopia, I would say. Hopefully one day we'll make it. And the official topic of the summit was water and sanitation, which initially, let's say, occupied the core of the discussions. The president of Ethiopia talked about water being at the center of innovation and development for Africa. He talked about his newly constructed dam that created energy for Ethiopia, which, well, this is a completely bigger topic. But the main discussions happened around security. These were like the big elephants in the room that could not go unnoticed or not commented on. And leaders, prime ministers came together and said basically that the African Union needs to step in more. They have to find a way to mediate in, for example, the Sudan conflict or in the DRC and M23 conflict, which for the audience, which for those who are not very aware of what's going on in these countries, there is a very tragic and bloody conflict in Sudan between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces. Apart from the security concerns going on, there were some other interesting conversations related to the economics of Africa. There is this project called the African Free Trade Agreement, which they have been working on. The idea is for all African countries to come together and reduce over time the tariffs on on their imports and exports, so that there is a demand of goods, which would need to add value to the resources that those countries have. So it's about how industrialization and demand comes together so that Africa becomes self-reliant with their neighbors, with each other. And I read this interesting comment that there was a different briefing on African economics and finance. And there were a couple of questions being asked by Chinese outlets. And apparently it was quite a few. So we can see the influence already, the interest in investing, right? Because we already see Chinese investments everywhere. So I think that overall, the takeaway from the African Union Summit is working on African unity, security issues, and economics and industrialization development.
It sounds like they're trying to be more self-reliant, be able to sell products to each other. That way they can build up industry that isn't reliant on other regions. Also with the security, I mean, the conflict that's happening in Sudan has been running as long as the one in Gaza, a little bit longer by a couple of months. So, I mean, they're living the exact same hellscape that the Gazans are living in, but exemplified by millions of people instead of thousands. So it's great that this subject was brought up because Sudan is not talked about very often. And apparently somebody already solved that problem in the DRC. That war has ended. I don't know about that, but there's still a lot of fighting going on. But talking about security and working on regional security and trying to figure it out for themselves is something that should be supported, because the trust factor of other regions coming in and other countries telling other governments how to do things smacks of imperialism. So it is something that is really important that it's being talked about at this conference. So it's good.
It's also security has been a major issue in the past decades in Africa, and one of the problem, if you take only the problem in what's going on in the Sahel region, so and especially between Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, these three countries came along to create the Association of Sahelian Countries, I believe.
Yep.
I don't remember exactly the name of this association, and they are openly refusing the African Union. So it's very complicated to have a diplomatic relations with these countries, and now more than ever, especially that they are suffering serious threats because of jihadist groups and radical Islamist groups in the region. So there was as well like a shift in the way these groups operated in the region. And now they are completely targeting economic infrastructures, especially in Mali, where roads are completely blocked. And it's very complicated to see how the situation will be solved, especially now then that these countries and neighboring countries are beginning to face the same security issues.
Yeah. Well, if our audience wants to take a deeper dive in the African conflicts, you can go to whygeopoliticsmatter.com and read a couple of our articles. Now, with those final takeaways from the African Union Summit, I would like to give way to our last topic, which is the US and Iran tensions rising. Please, Meredith, tell us what is going on. Give us a little sense of what's happening right now.
The Wall Street Journal has been reporting that the U.S. is sending significant numbers of jet fighters and support aircraft into the Middle East, and they have assembled the greatest amount of air power in the region since the 2003 invasion in Iraq. The firepower will give the U.S. the option to carry out sustained weeks-long air raids on Iran. They clearly have three options to them. They want to either halt Iran's already battered nuclear program, wipe out the missile force, or try to topple the regime. This is not going down very well. The Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has threatened to sink U.S. warships amid continuing nuclear talks in Geneva between the Middle Eastern nation and the United States. So Khamenei said on the social media platform X, the Americans constantly say that they sent a warship toward Iran. And of course, a warship is a dangerous piece of military hardware. The Iranian and U.S. officials have held indirect discussions in Geneva through Omani diplomats earlier this week. And during these talks, the foreign minister made a statement saying that the U.S. has not asked the Iranians to stop enriching uranium. So this has kind of been touch and go since Trump has stated that he has asked, and now the Iranians say that they haven't. So it's just kind of up in the air and getting to be a little bit touchy just in the diplomatic discussions. We also have somebody else who has decided to join the group chat, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has urged Trump to seize the moment and bring down the regime before it regains strength, and other U.S. allies in the region, including the Gulf countries and Turkey, have urged caution. So basically, Trump has said that very bad things could happen, which he likes to use the bad things thing all the time. But he has also given them a 10-day leeway. Venezuela had a 10-day leeway, and things did not go that way. So it is a little bit, we don't really know what's going to happen, but this buildup looks exactly like what happened with Venezuela, and this is against a nuclear enriched country. So there are a lot of things that are happening that it's a very fast pace. Even by the time this episode comes out, things could be totally different. So he could start pulling back those warships. It just, it's been a lot, and it's been very tense and but the diplomats are trying to get something settled in Geneva.
There's also the matter of what do you think that the U.S. is pushing for? Meaning, do they want deterrence? Do they want a change of regime? Or do they want the Iranian government to just accept the terms? I feel like that's a little blurred what the ideal outcome for the U.S. Will be. What do you think?
Their goals right now are stating, we want you to stop the nuclear program. We don't want you to enrich any more to get the bomb. There is, because of the Iranian protests earlier this year, the Iranian people are expecting regime change. And Trump said that he was going to be there for those people. So it isn't overt of what they're actually going to do, but the official stance is to shut down the nuclear program. But then there's somebody else, a very good friend of the U.S., Israel, is trying to get them to bring down Iran altogether so that they can be the major player in the region. So it is a lot all over the place, and there is real no confirmation from the actual government stating these are our objectives, these are hard and fast, but basically they're saying please stop with the enrichment of the uranium and we'll kind of leave you alone. But we don't know if the Trump administration will actually pull back and do a better job of being a reasonable partner in any of this.
Yeah. We could also think about in terms of regional stability, right? Saudi Arabia, Qatar, they must be very tense in terms of what's going to happen next. What if Trump is able to take the Khomeini out of the power position, but in that scenario, what would come next? Something better, something worse? I think everyone in this moment is just waiting to see what's gonna happen. And I read this. People is doing Trump astronomy. Trump astrology, trying to see if
Right.
planets align and if energies change. And
Read the tea leaves.
Exactly. Trying to read Trump's decisions and there's
You're absolutely right. Like, I think we should be looking at what happened in Syria. What happened in Syria? The country, Iran is 4 times the size of Syria. What happens when people start flooding out of the country? These are millions more people that are going to be trying to get out of Iran. And what is it going to happen to the impact on the region with all that immigration? When people are trying to get out because things have completely imploded inside the country. And that's not just in the Middle East. That's going to impact Europe too, because they've already experienced what happened with the Syrian war. So if there's a war in Iran, there's way more people that are going to be trying to get out and trying to get to a safe place. So trying to figure out what the U.S. is going to do to actually help after any kind of invasion, they haven't learned their lesson. And with so many more people, it's just going to be... It's just hard to understand what that impact is going to be. But if we look at Venezuela, we look at Syria, we look at all the different issues that have happened since then, I think we're really going to have to be prepared for whatever comes next, no matter what scenario they decide.
And there's a real will from the from the population in Iran is to stop with everything. They are fed up by Khamenei government, but they are also afraid of the intervention of the US because they basically don't want the US as well. And there's also the Shah, which is the I think the rightful heir of the previous rulers of Iran, who's also coming into and he's also coming into the equation and starting discussing a bit more and being a bit more present on the medias, because he would be ready as well to lead back Iran. So
I think he also had a speech at Munich. Is that
yeah,
right?
he attended the Munich conference.
So it's very, very complicated. And the situation, the political situation and the way it will be treated will for sure impact the region. I think also you didn't mention, but Turkey in the equation has also something to do as being one of the biggest regional power. And a problem could be also with the Kurdish, the Kurdish minorities in Iran and now with Syria as well.
Yeah, well, current state of affairs are very unpredictable. As with everything, it could change tomorrow, right after I finish editing this video. So we'll see what comes next. And for sure, we'll be there to let everyone know what's going on and give a little sense of this crazy world. So thanks, everyone, for spending your time with us today. If you want to keep the conversation going, then make sure to follow us on social media. Meredith, in what platforms can they find us?
Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, TikTok,
TikTok, yes,
LinkedIn,
and LinkedIn, of course. And of course, our official website, whygeopoliticsmatter.com. So make sure to subscribe so you'll receive a bi-weekly newsletter. And we'll be releasing podcast episodes every 2 weeks as well. So thank you, everyone, and see you on the next episode. Thank you, guys.
Laters.
See you.
For more articles on why geopolitics matters, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at whygeopoliticsmatter.com.